What's up, everybody, and welcome to the Insurrection Inc. podcast. We want to thank you for listening, and we hope you enjoy the show. Welcome to the Insurrection Inc. podcast. Today it's just me, Porter, with Monty and Jay to talk about Agorism and the political process. So this isn't going to be really format. We're looking to do kind of like a friendly discussion to, understand a little bit more of each other's sides. I'm going to be representing the Agorist side. I definitely don't really believe in the political process and believe in the use of counter-economics to increase liberty and eventually end the state. Whereas Monty and Jay aren't necessarily opposed to that, but they both believe in the political process to a much greater extent than I do. I know Jay's a member of the Libertarian Party. I don't know if Monty is. But so yeah, that's going to be kind of the format for today. That's all I wanted to say to start off. Jay and Monty, y'all got anything?
Quickly add, no, I am not a member.
All right.
Yeah, I became a member
and I wouldn't say I believe in the process more than, we'll get into it, the specifics, but more of spreading the message through it.
I believe
that's part of what I mean. Yeah.
Yes.
I believe in some aspects of the process, but not all of them. But yeah again, that's something we'll get into in a minute.
Right. So we agreed we wanted to start off with like common ground. And so I think that's a good kind of segue into it. We obviously all don't believe in the end in actual like politicians existing and like holding power and stuff. Like obviously that's none of our goals. So, but y'all do believe
to an extent all three of us. Yeah, to an extent, all three of us believe in counter-economics. That's one thing, but continue.
Right, the ultimate goal for all of us is obviously anarchism. So, like, none of us are advocating for people to be in power. That's not the point of using the political process or the Libertarian Party. I know, like, obviously that's not your goal. So, I think to start off, I'm going to kind of outline how I came to believe in agorism and, like, why I think it took hold in my head really strongly, and kind of why I didn't come from the politics direction. So we talked in the inaugural episode of this podcast a little bit about like how we came to libertarianism, and I didn't go too in depth on mine, but I mentioned that I was super involved in, well, not super involved, in like an action campaign form. I was very internet involved for Austin Peterson's Senate campaign in Missouri in 2018, right when I was kind of coming around to libertarianism. And I remember it was sometime in August, whenever the primary elections were for the Republican Party nomination. I was so sure Austin was going to win because like the support online was just overwhelming. He just had the numbers online over anyone else. And then he came in like fourth behind Josh Hawley, who's now a piece of shit senator for Missouri, and like two other people who were just completely no name, like no one had ever heard of them. And I just could not figure out. And then I realized like how much of a bubble libertarianism and those ideas really were, even though he was obviously running as a Republican at the time. Austin Peterson is definitely a libertarian. And I realized
the nomination for the presidency prior.
Yeah, 2016, that's right.
Mm-hmm.
And so that happened right at my formative time when I was coming to libertarianism, and lost a lot of faith in the political process after that, just because it happened right at the same time I was being introduced to all these ideas. So I think that definitely had an effect. And then we've mentioned this before as well. I think all of us pretty much came to libertarianism more from the economic side. I know at least Jay and I did.
Yeah, Monty too.
And so one of my favorite economists, this is not the last time you'll hear me talk about him, is Per Byland. And I first discovered him on a podcast about agorism. And he was talking about, he makes a distinction between vertical and horizontal agorism. I'm not going to go too in here because this isn't really the place for it. But what really attracted me was when he talked about vertical agorism, which is like the Carl Hessian kind of thing. It's local production facilities and small scale, low overhead production for local trade, community trade, basically self-sufficiency, but without putting in too much extra effort or reducing your standard of living. And that really sounded attractive to me, and it was like a different method that I hadn't heard before. And that was only maybe 2 or 3 months after Austin Peterson had lost. So that was kind of my first introduction to it. And I just I read a lot of Carl Hess after that, a lot more Per Byland as well. That was really how I got introduced to ideas. So that being said, I want to ask you, Jay and Monty, how did you come to believe political side? Like, was there any experiences like that when you were just getting into libertarianism, or like what exactly brought you to the party?
You want to take this one first, Monty, or should I?
I'll just, like the Ron Paul, like even though I was, it was way past 2012 or 2008 when I became one, that those videos and that information still exist, and that was a huge influencer, and especially the YouTube videos really helped me. So that's one aspect of the process which I think helps, that large attention and the ability to speak to many people and spread the word effectively if you're principled.
And Jay?
Let's see, where to start. So when I came into libertarianism, it was the 2016 election, and one of the things I remembered was I was already considering myself libertarian, but I couldn't bring myself to support Gary Johnson because of what a fucking clown he was. And there was just something that struck me then, where I knew So one of the first times I came into libertarianism, it was 2016 election, and I couldn't bring myself to support Gary Johnson because of what a clown he was. And it hit me then that the federal government is lost. There is no coming back from that. And I mean, that was my awakening to radical libertarianism. You can't really save that. Washington, D.C., it's too mired in there, and then seeing this guy who ran on, I'm going to drain the swamp and all this bull crap, he gets in there and it's more of the same. So it really left me with no reason to believe that, you could get anybody in there who would fix that. I mean, even if you got Ron Paul in there, they would have had him Kennedy'd. Just plain and simple.
I think Jeff Deist actually said that. Like in an interview one time or something like that. He said that we knew if we got close, there would be a plane crash or something.
Yeah, they said they would never get him on a plane again if he got too close. So it's just plain and simple. You're not going to get anybody in the federal government that stirs the pot too much, because they will be eliminated by all the interests. But just because I reject the federal government doesn't mean I reject participating in the more controllable forms of the government. Because at the end of the day, the federal government can only do so much. Yeah. Look at California, look at Colorado, look at Washington with their weed legalization.
And the libertarian, those Reason guys, I remember listening, they've done, those Cato types. Occupational licensing reform, I think that happened in Nebraska with a libertarian. So there's real change that can be done at the state or local levels.
Yeah, there's a lot of change. There's a lot of decentralization you can do, and
that's what I mostly support is decentralization, and that's part of the political thing, I think, though.
Same here. I also believe in slowing down
nullification and secession. Yeah, and it's a defensive vote in part. Like if you said an amendment, if there's an amendment that comes up in Florida or something.
Yeah, exactly. Every 2 years on a ballot. The way that the Florida ballot works is that things like assault weapons bans are going to end up on the ballot for the people to vote first, and then the state government.
Or I think medical marijuana was on one from Missouri recently.
Yeah. So
it wasn't an amendment change; it was some law, though, I think.
So I may be opposed to voting on the morals of it. Of course, it is by any means violence if you're going to go and force somebody to do something by the will of the government. But at the same time, I don't see how you can make that argument if you're voting down something like an assault weapons ban. Where's the violence in telling the government, no, you're not going to do this. You are not going to restrict people's right to bear the arms that they want. And if there was something like an NFA repeal on the ballot, I would go and vote that, yes, Florida should repeal the NFA. Whereas a very hardline agorist, or even a very hardline ANCAP, would say, no, you can't go vote for that because voting is immoral. Voting is violence. And I just cannot vibe with that. And I've even heard some agorists say that things like the Free State Project are violence. But when you are talking about either limiting or reducing the government's power, and you have the ability to do it through a vote, I think that is more worthwhile. And you also see it like with states that they get a lot of migrants from California or New York, whatever, and they start coming into a state that is relatively good on things like the right to bear arms and taxes, and even in some red states, they're starting to be softer on things like the drug war. The only good thing that somebody from a blue state could come in with is voting against the drug war. But the rest of it, they come in and they start voting. They start voting for the violence against you. So that's one thing that I do believe that, to an extent, you have the ability to prevent tyrannical laws from coming into your state. You can't stop it in the federal government. You're screwed on that front. But again, I don't believe in trying to change the federal government. And the other thing is, I believe in participating in the LP, because going back to Gary Johnson, the dude was a fucking clown. But there, you can have immense control over the Libertarian Party. Immense. It's a very small party. And in just the last 2 months or so of people like Tom Woods and Dave Smith and Peter Quinones pushing their followers to go and join the LP. So all those followers from Tom Woods and Dave Smith and Pete Quinones and all that is an immense change in the LP of a party with currently 15,000 dues paying members, or upwards over 15,000. It started 2 months ago with 14,000. So that is already quite an increase. And those are the people that are going to go in there, and they are going to put in somebody like a Ron Paul that is going to put those messages out there and keep them alive and have them spread on the internet. Because look at the effect of the two Ron Paul campaigns.
Exactly.
He didn't win.
We cannot underestimate that, because it not only influenced the people at the time, tens of thousands of people, but it continues to influence people.
Mm-hmm. Which leads
such as
to
myself.
So much growth. And yeah, that's same here. So the best that we can hope for with that is that you get enough people that wake up and they're able to congregate together and create an area where there's change. And in that regard, that is where I embrace, counter economics, where you join together with other like-minded people and you start weaning yourself off the state, and you start weaning yourself off of as much as you can. And you start creating these self-reliant communities. You wean yourself off the dollar with cryptocurrency. You start creating a self-reliant community. You start doing all this where it will be able to withstand what the government throws at it, including, the inevitable financial collapse. How many more recessions can this government how many more recessions can the entire global financial system withstand? Look at 2008, 12 years later, people are still reeling from it.
And it's only going to get bigger.
Yeah. This is a giant bubble that's coming, and that's going to be the death knell of the state. So that's where I do support counter economics and libertarians congregating.
See, that's interesting, because that's somewhere we intersect, actually. I was listening to like a live stream episode that Pete Quinones did on his podcast with Sally Agorist. And,
yeah, I watched that one too.
Yeah, and Sal said that Konkin said that the only purpose he saw for the Libertarian Party was recruitment purposes for counter-economics. So that's where you were going to find the most radical libertarians. Of course, now it's not really the whole Libertarian Party, it's the Mises Caucus specifically. Yeah. But that's still a point like we agree on. Jay,
that's basically the same thing that Rothbard's, but as an educational organization. This is the biggest organization with libertarian in the name. This is the first libertarian thing people discover. And you're not going to get people to come in and join it if you have people like Nick Sarwark running the party.
And he barely won his seat back.
Yeah.
So
yeah, which is why I'm very hopeful for 2020.
We could, probably get him out.
You talk about not underestimating like the power of a good spokesman for libertarianism like Ron Paul, because he had such a big influence. And I'm not going to try and take away from Ron Paul here. Obviously, I love the guy. I mean, he's great. But I also think we shouldn't overestimate that, if makes any sense. Because we gained tens of thousands of libertarians from the Ron Paul years, and from people who came a little bit after that.
It is quiet now, yes.
Watch his videos on YouTube and stuff, but it's still such a small fraction of the population. I don't know if this is too pessimistic, but I've kind of resigned myself to thinking that most people aren't ever going to accept libertarian principles on the philosophy alone. And so the best to convince them is to really just increase the cost of relying on the state so much that they have, I don't want to say no choice because it's not forceful, but they have almost an insurpassable or insurmountable incentive to move away from it and join the voluntary communities, just because
that'll
that
happen.
makes more sense for them to do. Like, I don't know exactly how to put this, because I don't want to, ruin state services on purpose. I'm not a collapsitarian. I don't want to make people's lives more miserable than they have to be. Although not all collapsitarians are like that. Just disclaimer. I don't hate all of you.
No,
it's not anything like
a few
that.
are just like more preppers for the doomsday.
Yeah, which I totally respect, and I like that a lot, actually. I don't want to slander collapsitarians. I didn't mean to do that.
I'll slander them, but on another episode.
That's great, yeah. But yeah, I guess there is plenty of value still in converting those people that we can. I mean, the more numbers, the better, right? I think we all agree on that.
I mean, look at the effect of Ron Paul. It's not just that he woke up those people. Imagine it's exponential, because he woke up those people, and how many of them themselves became spokespeople? How many of them themselves went on to become libertarian writers, libertarian podcasters, libertarian videographers? How many of them went on to go and talk to their friends and family and their co-workers? And even if you awaken one person each, then that one person goes on and it becomes like a multi-level marketing, but for liberty. That does not suck.
Yeah, and I'll just add that that's the thing with decentralization is I don't want, like, I know it's impossible to convert everyone. So just splitting apart, having 50 different states, even, or 100, the smaller you go, you would not have to convert everyone. Everyone would be able to live as they want right now, get more of what they want.
Yeah, actually, I'm glad you brought that back up, because I was having a discussion with a couple of my friends in real life, so to speak, about a week ago, about de jure nullification and secession versus de facto nullification and secession. And I don't think that you're going to get much de jure nullification and secession. You'll get some, like we've seen great examples of it recently. And I'm not against this at all.
If you want to go and just quickly describe de jure versus de facto.
Oh, yeah, okay. So de jure means de jure means by law. So like basically through the political process is what I'm getting at. Whereas de facto means just in reality, even if it's not officially recognized, that's just the reality of it.
Yeah, it's more like civil disobedience.
Right. So 2 examples of like the different types of nullification within the same kind of political issue would be recently the Second Amendment sanctuary counties in Virginia specifically. They've been popping up in other states too, but especially
or the immigration
Virginia.
Sanctuaries.
Yes, those are an example of nullification too, although California would never use that word.
Yeah.
But that's exactly what it is. But so that's a good example of de jure nullification, because that was done through a vote at the county level. But then de facto nullification in that same regard would be Agorist 3D printing guns just because they can, and working on projects like the FGC-9, which is close to being released now. It's going to allow you to make a semi-automatic submachine gun anywhere in the world out of fully unregulated parts, which is just insane to me. That's finally about to become a reality. But that's de facto nullification. Like we're making it impossible to enforce gun control, because anyone can make one anywhere in the world, and you literally can't stop them without taking extreme measures that would reach far beyond just people trying to make guns.
And
because
I
the
think
parts
that's
are
the
so
saving grace of
common and easy to
technology.
get.
It's not just limited to guns, but encryption or cryptocurrencies.
Yes, that's another example. We're
Invest in
de facto nullifying inflation by the use of cryptocurrencies. I mean, theoretically, you could supposedly vote back in a gold standard or something. That'd be like
unlikely.
de jure.
Very unlikely.
Yeah, extremely unlikely.
Yeah, which is that's where I really vibe with Agorist, because there are some things where that's just completely lost. Currency, I love the idea of a hard currency.
I don't think the dollar will go back on it, but if we got legal tender laws, people would start using maybe I don't know. We'd see if
but it's
gold or
unlikely
silver
that's the thing. It's like I would love to see that come back as long as we have a government, but it won't, because there's no incentive for the government. There's no incentive for the government to do it, even if there's a vote. They would never do that. Then you can sign as many petitions as you want, and that's never going to happen.
No, not under the current government, but let's say the federal government did not exist anymore, or there were states outside of it. That competition, I'm sure if you had, let's just say, 25 independent states, I'm sure one of them would eventually.
I doubt that, because when you look at the actual track record for this, there's not a single country in the world that uses a hard currency. Not a single one. Now, it could be possible, but I find it highly unlikely. So that's where I really vibe with Agorist and de facto nullification, in that I do believe that if going forward, libertarians should, for the most part, abandon trying to go back to a gold standard and focus on moving forward to cryptocurrency. Because
I don't disagree. Just let's say the next collapse comes or something. You don't think states are gonna, especially ones that are hit the hardest? Like, I'm sure things can change a lot, and really can surprise you with how far they change.
It could surprise me,
but I'm not gonna hold my breath on it. I don't exactly.
Yeah, I highly doubt it. It just does not seem likely to me.
Actually, Monty, I'm gonna go ahead and say I think they're gonna go the other direction. I think they're gonna double down.
I think so.
There's a great episode of the Human Action.
I'm not just talking about the United States with that, but yes, I agree with the United States. It would, and most of the world, if not all.
I agree. I think if the states broke up, they would still just start printing their own fiat, because that is what the world is used to now.
Yeah, they would, but no, the point of legal tender laws being fixed or abolished is, well, fixed, but is not that they wouldn't have their own currency, but that you could still be able to use either gold or silver, get rid of the capital gains tax, get rid of...
Yeah, in a scenario like that, then I can see the people, which again would go back to the people. And we'll go back to de facto nullification, where
it becomes more likely the smaller the state is.
Yeah, because you see people who stock up for emergencies will buy silver dollars because of how transmutable they are, how fungible they are.
Well, there's the question. If we think it's going to happen by de facto nullification, with basically the repeal, not the actual political repeal of these legal tender laws, but just de facto people go back to these hard currencies, because it's too cold to stay on the fiat after the next collapse, but you say it works better the smaller the state is, then how do we achieve that? How do we break it up into smaller states?
Yeah, again, that would rely on people embracing Agorist means.
I don't think you have to embrace Agorism to get to a nullification or secession type.
No, not nullification or secession, but in some cases like currency, where even if legal tender laws were abolished, then in that case you bring Gresham's law into reality, and you have people competing with the state's currency. Now, where that will go from there, I don't know, because I don't put much stock and faith into people. But
so, Monty,
at the end of the day, ask your question.
Yeah, let me ask you just a simple question, like yes or no. I don't mean to put you on the spot. I just made that sound a lot more intense than I meant to. But like, do you believe that there is some point in the future at which nullification and secession are a reasonable possibility from the political process? Like, you think you could get a majority in a state to vote for secession from the United States or something like that?
I don't know what I would put it at, but it's definitely a possibility.
Okay, so that's where we differ. I don't think it's ever going to happen that way.
It's just like, you don't think the 63 million people who voted Trump are gonna start to be upset and realize that they're never gonna win another election? Like, they're not gonna get rid of conservative voters as the demographics continue to change.
No, because I think they're still stuck in...
The Republican Party may shift more to fit whatever they need to fit, but those voters will still be the same in those flyover states.
Or no,
even it could come from the left, like if Trump won again or something.
But let me take this to something a little more specific. Let's say, maybe not the next crash. I don't think the next crash will be the end, but it will be the second to last nail in the coffin. So let's say you have a place like New Hampshire, where a significant number of libertarians have come in, and you have a financial collapse.
Wait, just real quick, how many have actually moved? I know they met that 20,000 pledged years ago, but
I think like 25,000
actually moved or pledged.
Like moved.
Okay. Because
So
I know
you have quite a significant number, and they don't need to get the whole state to secede. Because here's the thing with secession: they could pick their region and secede. So let's say there comes a financial collapse, and you have this congregated group of libertarians who have been using cryptocurrency for quite a while, have become quite self-reliant, and have the numbers, at least in their region. So you don't think that it will be likely that those people would get together and say, we are now our own region, Porter. You don't think that could be likely.
It's possible. Do you think that's an example of political secession and nullification, or would that just be de facto at that point?
I think that would be political. I think that would be political because those people would get together as a political body and they would say, we are no longer a part of this. We are a self-governing region, because it would not become encapsulated.
And they would use the Constitution even, or, those founding documents to reinforce their argument, and there's a legitimate argument to be made.
And if the government is incredibly weakened by their own idiocy over the last couple of decades coming to roost...
Well, I don't think do you think people would be willing to send troops into...
I don't think so.
Like if California wanted out.
Next question is, what's the response going to be? Like, what do we think?
I don't think so. I think we live in a different era than the 1860s.
Yeah,
and now
you're not going to have Abraham Lincoln, just like Tom Woods. Someone was on his podcast.
Yeah, because look, 20 years ago, the Bundy Ranch or the rally in Richmond would have ended in the feds firing, because there was no way for them. There was no way for them.
You think the rally would have ended the same as?
It's a possibility.
I don't know.
Very big possibility. I don't know. Maybe with the sheer
that's kind of extreme. Numbers, but I understand what you're saying about the.
But maybe in some cases, like they would have been a little more violent.
Yeah.
Here's something.
So, but those things can't happen anymore.
Or that Oregon ranch standoff.
How? Yeah, that's the Bundy Ranch, and then the one that was up.
Okay, exactly. Yeah.
So those things, those happen, and 20 years ago, the government could have painted a whole narrative, because the truth would have been unable to get out from the people who were aggressed upon their side. Never would have been able to get out. Like Waco, like Ruby Ridge, like all that. Or there was apparently also another militia
Ruby
in
Ridge
Nevada.
With that, Oregon. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's another interesting dilemma, is if it ever comes to that, which I guess, I think it is possible. I guess I do kind of agree with you there.
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily say, I wouldn't give it a percent, but go on,
Yeah. I don't know if I agree with exactly how it's going to happen, but I don't think anyone can predict that. So I'll say, I agree with you. I think that's
I wouldn't
possible.
even try to,
But given that possibility, what do we think the media is going to do if and when it happens? And how's that going to affect things?
Same shit they've always done.
Yeah, they will cry neo-Confederates and a racist conglomerate and all that, but at the end of the day, if they want to leave, and in this scenario where the government is incredibly weakened by a financial collapse, they can't march troops in.
You're saying under those stances, under the circumstances of a financial collapse.
I don't think a financial collapse has to happen for this.
I don't think it has to happen, but I think it would be it would grease the wheels.
Oh yeah, certainly. If it's in the middle,
do you think there will be more secession?
Respond.
Do you think there'll be more secession talks if Trump wins?
It's a possibility, but I don't think
it depends, because there'll be more electoral reform votes. Because I think if Trump wins, he'll still lose the popular vote, maybe.
Yeah, and if you think about it, it was more dangerous for him to win the first term than the second term, because the second term he's a lame duck. He can't win any more terms, so they're not really gonna freak out.
Yeah, exactly.
So I don't think that's likely. I don't think secession will be on the table, but they brought it back into the mainstream through his first election, and now it is in the public consciousness.
Yeah.
So if something drastic like a financial collapse were to happen, then I do believe it would be more likely, because of, it is now something that is becoming acceptable to talk about again. These people have an incentive because they were failed by the federal government. It couldn't save them this time from the bubble bursting, because the bubble just got too big for them to tape back up. And it would create, in my opinion, the perfect storm for this.
So Monty was actually talking about this a little bit earlier today. He talked about how the left has more of almost like an imperialist ideal when it comes to their, I don't want to call them principles. That gives them too much credit.
Yes.
But like their ideas. So I think they are less likely to secede. We're not going to see that from them. They're going to want to take over the first chance they get. I think Monty was right about that.
I think they'll realize, it's like Tom Woods was talking in his episode with F.H. Buckley. I think they'll wait, with Trump, they just have to wait 4 years and then it's theirs, the demographics, because young people or immigration. But,
the demographics are just
they're
on the
changing.
side.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that
and there's no sign that it's going to go back anytime soon. So.
Right. So acknowledging that, doesn't that mean that any political secession process is likely going to come from the right, which inevitably means Republicans, or at least conservatives? They don't necessarily have to identify with the Republican Party, but agitated voters in primarily red states, or what are red states right now, who just end up wanting to leave to get away from the Democrats.
And that's what I was saying about the 63 million voters who voted Trump. And that's just all of those voters are not thinking.
Doesn't that mean that any libertarian secession movement is going to align with those voters? And will that require people who believe in that kind of process to sacrifice their principles in order to vote alongside those people, or work with people in state legislatures with whom they disagree on a lot of stuff?
I would vote for secession, like if it was on the ballot or something. I would definitely, because you're minimizing aggression. And it's like West Virginia, their governor, I believe, he wants to allow some Virginia counties to join West Virginia, since they left Virginia during the Civil War.
I'm not saying not to vote for secession.
No, I'm just saying it's becoming more and more.
Yep.
But I don't think you would have heard someone say that.
Yeah, but in my opinion, I don't care if it'll be a conservative state or a progressive state that pushes it forward, because I think at the end of the day, it's a step in the right direction. Because when you look on the state level,
exactly,
if you borrow states like New York, Connecticut, Massachusetts, New Jersey, California, and all that shit, the other states are not anywhere near perfect. But not to invoke Cato, because I don't like them too much. But one of the good things they do is the freedom in the 50 states.
Yeah, I reference that a lot.
Yeah, where they go in and they measure how free each state is. And you see that there is some correlation between the red states and freedom. Now, correlation
and it's
is
like
not causation. But
I saw a list of like 15 of the best cities to live or something, or raise kids or something. And most of them are in red states.
Yeah, so it's much easier for a libertarian to live in a red state, and at the end of the day, I do believe it will be easier for a libertarian to change a red state. So
I think most likely the push would come from the right.
Yeah, because there's.
Oh, I think so too.
There's this old saying,
but
there's this old saying that you can teach a leftist economics, but you can't teach a rightist peace. And I think just the last few years,
you can't teach a rightist what?
Peace, because they're too obsessed with war.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I think the last few years.
I mean, let's not give credit to the left either. I mean, far left is or anti-war, but yeah.
Exactly, but it's a phrase that goes back to the left being anti-war and the right being pro every war.
Exactly. Thanks, Obama, for killing that.
The far left just wants the government to use violence at home and not abroad.
Yeah. So I think that it would be easier for a libertarian to influence a red state that secedes, because at the end of the day, the red states do happen to be more libertarian than
so what was the question
states.
He was asking? Because I think we're getting.
Would it be abandoning your principles to vote alongside these people?
Definitely.
And I don't think so.
Yeah, like I said, minimizing aggression.
Those people coming into your side of the principles,
and then you would instantly have political
you.
Power.
You're not flocking to them.
I think I may have phrased it wrong. Confusingly, that's not your fault. I wasn't talking about the vote for secession itself. I wouldn't be against that. I don't think that's sacrificing principles either. I agree with you there. I'm saying, is that going to cause problems by doing it that way? Because then you're essentially accepting control of the state by Republicans and conservatives, with whom you have other massive differences other than the secession issue, which in this hypothetical you would still agree on.
Would you be abandoning your principles in that situation? That's a tough one to answer, because.
Wait, what do you mean abandoning? Like, I won't support.
Like, if you're accepting control, I get what you're saying. That.
Yeah.
If you were accepting control,
that's a strong word. Are you compromising a little bit?
I'm striving for an
still don't think
ideal,
you're
and that is a stateless society.
I don't think that you're compromising principles. You are just pushing the dialogue forward, and you're pushing your goals forward, and then you are still working down the road to push for more freedom. So you are taking this, you're taking 2 steps forward and 1 step back instead of 1 step forward and 2 steps back. Because yes, it's not great to have any of those people in control, no matter the wing.
And I think the war issue would, if any state that seceded would not have the power, like maybe Texas would have the power that the military does now, especially any small state would not be fighting any overseas wars unless it was alongside the international community.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
Monty, I agree with that. And we actually talked in the group chat a little bit about the war issue and like solutions to that. And we both agreed that it's not really going to happen until it just becomes like too expensive. Even like I think it happened in a Ron Paul commercial or a speech on the floor that was made into a commercial. One of where he says, after all like financial and fiscal tricks have been exhausted or something like that. That's one of the lines.
Yeah,
I think we agreed that's when it's going to happen because no one's actually willing to, end the empire and take the steps that are required in order to actually roll military involvement.
And I think we all agree on that. It extends beyond the military-industrial complex. Sorry to cut you off.
No, you're good.
But it's just like think of the millions of people that work for the federal government. Even like you can't just cut that out. You know it has to die a different way.
Yeah. And you know what, Porter? I got an alternate question for you.
Okay.
Because I've interacted with some Agorists before that take the complete hardline stance on voting, and even in a situation like, voting for a referendum that would decriminalize drugs in your state. I've had interactions with them where they still consider that bad, even though objectively less people are going into cages now because you have decriminalized drugs. So do you believe that voting on a referendum like that would be a compromise of your principles?
See, we kind of dodged this question earlier, and I was planning on circling back around, and I still didn't answer, even though I was thinking about it. The simple answer is I don't know. I know that it would be compromising my principles to vote for it, but also at the same time, it would do a lot of good if it passed. So...
Well, I think we just have different principles because, like I was saying, I'm striving for a stateless society. I acknowledge that it's probably not going to happen, but so just in the quest for that, I would vote for it, obviously.
Yeah, and I hate to play tit for tat, but in a situation like that, you have to ask yourself, what's your greater principle? Saying that you get to sleep easy because you did not commit violence through voting, which again,
what is your principle exactly? Do you just reject the legitimacy of the state and you view any action like voting as legitimizing it or whatever?
So I don't like the idea of begging people for my rights. Like voting, I guess that's a good way to put it. It does, in a way, legitimize it. It like acknowledges implicitly that they have the right to decide whether or not it's legal to do drugs or sell drugs or own drugs or whatever based on what my opinion is and the opinion of a majority of people.
Exactly, like Michael Malice says, my rights are not up for discussion or vote.
Yeah.
And I totally agree with that, but...
Yeah, I agree with that, but at the end of the day, I think that the greater principle is people being able to walk free because they do not have the armed thugs of the state busting down their door for a gram of weed. You have less people
you've
in
succeeded
cages.
In rolling the state back. So your goal of a stateless society is closer realized.
Yeah, so you're playing tit for tat.
Even if it's just a fraction of a percent.
Yeah, your principle of not voting, at least for me, is lesser than your principle of overall total liberty for the people. Because when you roll back that part,
here's an interesting divide, kind of, is we're specifically talking referendums and stuff like that, and we'll get to voting for actual like politicians and people in a second, I think. But when it comes to referendums, you both live in states that have referendums on issues. Missouri and Florida both often vote on constitutional amendments and things like that with direct votes.
Ballot initiatives.
South Carolina, where I am, doesn't have that. We don't actually have a referendum system, and a majority of states don't. It's close, like half and half, but I think a minority of states have the referendum option. A majority still don't have even like a process for that. So this isn't even an option for me in South Carolina. Like, this hypothetical doesn't even apply to me, actually, because votes like this don't actually go up on statewide ballots.
No, and that's true, and that's where I believe that the de facto nullification leads to de jure nullification. Because if you live in a state like that, where you do not have the option for a referendum, then what happens is, if you have enough civil disobedience, then you start changing the culture of the state.
You at least, in the very least, change the culture and the politicians, or at least to some degree.
Yeah,
and especially at this local level. Like at the federal level, they all go to the elite schools and.
Yeah. Well,
and
actually,
that's what happened in Colorado.
Jay, that's a really good point that you make. A really interesting point, at least. You say that the de facto nullification leads to de jure. So there's actually an article by Kevin Carson about the Green New Deal, and I did some parts of it. But beginning, he says, I should throw in the usual disclaimers about my working assumptions. I'm not an insurrectionist. I don't believe the post-capitalist. Yeah, whatever. Anyway, he basically he gives like a brief one-paragraph overview of what he believes the post-state transition will look like. And he says something I really agree with and really find interesting. That's
you're a communist.
He says, shut up.
He's an agorist that's left libertarian.
I wouldn't consider him left libertarian, but
not at all.
Believes in property rights.
From the Hessian side, the Kantian side.
Whatever.
Yeah. So what are you saying?
From the Hessian side, he literally invented the word anarcho-capitalism. Come on now.
Yeah, okay.
But Carson says, although the final transition may involve some ruptural events, it will mostly be the ratification after the fact of a cumulative transformation. So to me, that kind of reflects what Jay just said about de facto leading to de jure. So are these referendums in these states just the ratification after the fact of Agorist activity that basically made it possible to enforce drug laws anyway?
I believe so, yeah. Which is why I believe in the Gestalt approach.
Wait. Were you saying that the civil disobedience with drug laws led to the marijuana now being legalized? Yes. Yeah, I agree, totally.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's the
How
same
many
thing
teens? Yeah,
it's the same thing with gun cultures.
So many people have done it. Exactly.
It's banned in Florida.
It accepted
the
it.
gun culture is too strong, and it's on referendum. And then, even if you had, look at Virginia. They may have gotten the whole house blue.
This is something we can all get excited about with 3D printers.
Totally.
I love
this example. We've seen this example already start happening with the drug war, with these laws being repealed because we finally figured out after 40, 50 years that they're impossible to enforce.
Well,
that they only cause harm.
Ever that they are, but lobbyists or special interest.
Does that mean we're going to start seeing that?
Yeah, you reach a point where just the tide is too strong on the civil side for it to continue.
Yeah, does that mean we're going to start seeing that with gun laws now that we're making it so difficult to enforce?
We kind of are, yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
State gun control laws have actually been getting better. And part of that, I think, was because of the 94 assault weapons ban, which sunsetted. So then people were like, I'm going to buy this gun that I previously could not.
Yeah,
I think that's true, yeah.
And they went
and in that same time frame, just my state, Missouri, went from like 47th in gun laws to it's like 8th now, maybe, or something.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Sadly, still like 20s, but that's just because states are good on guns.
Yeah.
It's so hard to overwhelm.
I have no idea what South Carolina is ranked, but I know it's the only state where you can legally launch a missile. So that's pretty cool. You have to get permission from the FAA first, but you can do it.
Yeah, that's something that I think even in an anarchist society, there's probably somebody that you have to go get permission first before you launch a missile that could destroy people's property.
Yeah.
I mean, no insurance company would ever cover you.
I think if you own a missile, you own enough land. You have enough money to own enough land to launch it safely.
I don't know, man. Maybe in Ancapistan, missiles will cost as much as a candy bar.
Urbanites owning. No, I think the weapon is that powerful. It's like nukes. Oh, this is off topic, so never mind.
That's incredibly off topic.
While we're still off topic,
but
when we get done recording, I'm going to send y'all my best pictures from my Welcome to Ancapistan folder in my phone.
Please.
But yeah, so at the end of the day, you get this tide of people that it's too overwhelming. Even in a state with no referendums, it gets too overwhelming to legislate. And the people that get elected have no choice but to cave on this one thing so they can continue having power.
Or they'll use it as a way to, politicians use that already to get elected and then they don't do anything about it.
Yeah.
But as you said, eventually it becomes so.
Yeah. And I mean, even the states get to practice de facto nullification because, again, with Colorado, they lost a court case that said that they couldn't nullify the federal drug laws, and they just ignored it. And the federal government, turns out, even with all the money they print, did not have enough money to keep sending federal agents in and busting dispensaries.
They just called their bluff. And
yeah.
I can't say I'm not in support of that, even though it mostly happened through the political process. That's fine too.
But it did start outside of the political process. You just had enough people that were smoking joints until the government caved.
Yeah. And Kevin Carson kind of acknowledges that in the same article I was talking about.
You read way too much Kevin Carson, for the record.
No, I've just had this one saved for a while because I like it a lot. He says, talking about the transformation and the process that'll take place. He says some of it will come from political engagement to run interference for the new society developing within the shell of the old. And so I guess I kind of agree that there might be a place in Agorist theory for really small scale or localized political engagement just to run interference for the actual Agorists who are on the ground making the building blocks for what comes next.
So I have a question now. It's the county level. Do you support that Second Amendment sanctuaries?
Which don't work.
Because
I do.
I know, but assuming let's say they had teeth, which you support, because that's local government being weaponized.
I see that as exactly what he's talking about as political engagement to run interference.
Yeah, interfere.
So yes, I do support that. Yeah,
it's like Missouri's the law they were trying to pass to nullify federal gun laws. It would also imprison or fine any federal agent trying to enforce those laws in the state.
Yeah, which was based.
Yeah.
So few of them.
So that's the state being interfering with what the federal government wants to do.
Yeah,
and it is based. I think they proposed it for 2020, so hopefully it.
Yeah. I mean, here's another quote from the next sentence. It says, some of it will come from using parts of the state against other parts and using the state's own internal procedural rules to sabotage it. And that's exactly what that is. That's, Missouri threatening to lock up federal agents is using the state to sabotage parts of the other parts of the state. I mean,
yeah, and unfortunately, that's just a practical issue. I don't know if it would work. Kansas had a law that nullified it didn't. I don't think it had the teeth part, but two guys got felonies though. So, but go on.
Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying that's particularly Agorist to do things like that, but it does help them, and it whether intentionally or unintentionally does run interference for the people who are doing the real groundwork, the preppers and the counter economists and all that. So maybe that's how we can end it, with kind of a truce between the political engagers and the Agorists, because we can, if we orchestrate this properly, we can organize so that we help each other out.
And I support both, so definitely I
believe in a Gestalt approach where it's just, I am not so willing to throw out the baby with the bathwater, because overall it's evil. Well, yes, the political process is incredibly evil. There is no doubt about that. And I trust politicians as far as I can throw them. So I don't trust them for shit. But at the end of the day, there is still some place for it because of how it can affect you and how it can affect you directly. But then there are strategies that if you mix them properly, then you make quite the headway.
So there's the lesson then is do what you feel most comfortable with. Take into account the opportunity cost of what you're doing, especially when it comes to politics. That's one of my biggest lessons, but we can work together for this and kind of orchestrate our efforts between the party involvement and the Agorist. It's not necessarily a conflict. It does to be, yeah.
Unless you're a mutualist Agorist, then get the hell out of my face.
Right after we got done quoting from the Kevin Carson article. Come on now.
I don't. I'll just put it like this: I don't get how there are mutualist Agorists, or how Konkin was a left libertarian, if Agorism believes in private property.
I think it has to do with the view of capitalist specifically.
Yeah, it has to do with his class structure theory, but at the end of the day, it's just like if you are a propertarian market anarchist like Agorists are, like Konkin was, then you tend to fall on not as if right or left has any fucking meaning for libertarians anyway. That's another discussion for another day.
Yeah, I think we should have a discussion on that. It'd be interesting.
Yeah, maybe we can address mutualism in a different episode.
I've been meaning to write an article on mutualism because there's just no critiques of them out there because they're such a small section. But I see them growing.
There's a mutualist ball meme somewhere out there that's like when no one can criticize you because no one knows what to believe.
Yeah, I've seen that. Those are the only ones I've seen. But anyway, we're getting on at about an hour here, so I think this was very productive. Actually,
I was about to say that it was a very productive discussion. We hit some points. That was great. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So plugs will be in the description. Thank you for listening to the Insurrection Inc. podcast. Hope you found this insightful. Have a good one.